He's Donald Trump's United States Attorney for Massachusetts, one of America's bluest states. But while he may not yet be a household name, the Sharon resident has served more than a decade at the Justice Department's Boston office, where he was lead prosecutor in drug trafficking, fraud, and immigration cases. Top issues for his boss, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and his boss, President Donald Trump. Last week, Lelling joined Sessions to announce the arrest of 25 on charges of identity theft and benefits fraud, 21 of whom were undocumented. But representing a conservative government in a progressive state involves a policy balancing act, like with pot, where he recently announced that while he won't, quote, effectively immunize Massachusetts residents from federal marijuana enforcement, his office will instead focus on combating the opioid epidemic. Lately, his caseload has included a number of successful prosecutions, including infamous mobster Frank the Cadillac Salemi and Carlos Rafael of New Bedford, better known as the Codfather. U.S. Attorney Andrew Lelling joins me now. It's good to meet you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So the Attorney General traveled here roughly 4 days ago for the announcement of the prosecution of 25 people, I think 21 of whom were undocumented. It's on the exact same day as the court ordered reunification of families separated at the border. Is it fair to say that that was not a coincidence, that it was in part intended to distract from that reunification chaos?
Oh, that was totally a coincidence. We picked the date. It's an operational decision. The agents tell us when they have enough evidence together to do the arrests we want them to make. We pick the day, we invite the Attorney General, and we hope he can make it.
Is that the kind of case that an Attorney General would ordinarily travel to a jurisdiction like Massachusetts? Or?
Well, it depends. If you're doing a case that reflects the administration's priorities, so here you've got two things that the Attorney General cares a lot about. Border security, protecting the public treasury. We were able to put both those things together in this case. We invited him to come, and his people decided that that was something he wanted to do.
Let me quote you to you in a related kind of thing you told Commonwealth Magazine. One of the things we wanted to highlight, in keeping with the president's priorities, was to at least bring into the public conversation there is some fraction of the illegal immigrant population in this country that's committing a number of other offenses. There is some fraction, but from the research I've seen, the fraction of people here illegally is lower than people who are born here. So aren't you conveying the wrong message when you identify a nationality, suggesting essentially those kind of people are more likely to commit crimes in your neighborhood?
Well, I think the point we're trying to make, and a point the Attorney General makes a lot, is that when it comes to people who are in the country illegally and who then commit other crimes, were it not for being able to enter the country illegally, they couldn't commit the other crimes.
By definition.
And so a stronger border means that they're not here to do that. I agree with you. The vast, vast majority of immigrants to this country, illegal or otherwise, are not running around committing crimes. It just happens to be that with illegal immigrants, the illegality of coming over the border is compounded by the crime they committed here.
Do you worry that you're sending a message that you don't appear to intend to be sending, though, about those people?
I don't think we're sending that message. I agree there is that risk. But I've tried to be very careful about that. And so, for example, like when I was talking to Commonwealth Magazine, we highlight the nationality of defendants we're prosecuting when those defendants have entered the country illegally, and we point that out. Because I do think it's in the public interest, or it's certainly part of the public conversation now, to highlight that when you have someone who has entered the country illegally who does something else illegally. If someone is in the country legally with an L, I do not have my people point out the nationality of that person. We're a country of immigrants. If you came here legally, you played by the rules, all right, well, then fine. That's not relevant.
Are you comfortable getting back to the first thing I asked you with this separation policy that the administration implemented for several months? The
separation policy is a little out of my lane. I mean, the separation policy isn't really a separation policy, right? So what happens is the Attorney General implements a zero-tolerance policy on the border, meaning every single person who comes over the border illegally, every adult, is prosecuted. A byproduct of being prosecuted is you're probably detained pending trial. A byproduct of detention is if you came over with kids, the kids have to go somewhere. And so that's where that phenomenon came from. But I'm not going to opine on whether it's good or bad. That's a Washington decision.
But the detention could be with your kid rather than with your kid separated.
Well, I think that's the problem they ran into. You can't do that. So when we prosecute people, we arrest people and they get detained, you can't be detained with your kids. I think now they're trying to change that a little bit under public pressure. But in the normal course, if you're charged with a crime, you can't be, you are separated from your family, no matter what you're charged with.
Can we move to marijuana? I know you haven't been asked any questions about this, so I figure it's a first instance situation here. You said the other day, and I hope I got you right, I just want to confirm, you won't immunize people, but you will say that we're not going to be prosecuting buyers and sellers of small amounts. I have you right there?
Yeah, I think that's roughly right.
Were you more precise because the Attorney General is softening, or because you were sick of being asked the same question and you wanted to give people as much notice as you felt they deserved?
It's more the latter. It wasn't because of any signal out of D.C. about the Attorney General softening on this. The reason why I did it is that the July 1 deadline, the July 1 date for the Cannabis Control Commission beginning to issue licenses to recreational dispensaries, that date had passed. And so it seemed like it was in the public interest to try and give a little bit of clarity instead of being coy. I mean, look, as I've said a bunch of times, 2,000 people last year in Massachusetts didn't die from smoking a joint, right? They died from opioids. All my resources are targeting opioids. So why make it harder than it needs to be?
Well, if that's the case, one of the things the chair of the Cannabis Control Commission, Hoffman, who's been here a couple of times, said he's concerned because no banks are buying in. So you sell $20,000 of marijuana in small amounts, you got to carry cash to either under your mattress or what. I don't even know what they do with it. Can you make the same assurance to bankers that if you collect money from a retail outlet that is selling small amounts, to quote you, that I'm not going to be prosecuting you either?
I can't. The reason why I can't is that banks are heavily regulated, probably by 2 or 3 different regulators besides anything I might do on the criminal side. So I'm not going to go there. I mean, you have Treasury, you have the FDIC, I think you have the Office of the Controller. There might be others. That's not necessarily my area of expertise. So I've shied away from that because it's so regulated that the regulators, I think, need to speak to that first.
But is that on your radar?
Is what on my
radar? The possibility of prosecuting a bank, should they choose to?
It's something we would consider, and I'll tell you why. The problem that I'm afraid of is the interstate movement of large amounts of drug proceeds. So marijuana trafficking, whether done legally under state law or not, can be a source of revenue for organized crime. It can be pursued illegally out of state and the drugs moved into state. It can be pursued illegally under Massachusetts law and move the money out of state.
A couple of very quick things. You're prosecuting a bunch of state cops who were accused, in one case, pled guilty to phony overtime. The governor has said he thinks that if convicted, it's not automatic, their pension should be taken away. Would you make the same recommendation to whatever the state entity is post-conviction, that their pensions be taken?
I'm not going to comment on that. That would be a thumb on the scale. There's a state system for that, the State Retirement Board or whichever entity handles trooper pensions, and ask between them and the troopers.
One last quick one. About a month ago, there were reports that you were reviewing groping allegations against the son of the governor. Are you?
I can't confirm or deny the existence of investigations. What I can say is that, we have sole jurisdiction. The feds have sole jurisdiction over what happens on airplanes in the sky, but I'm not allowed to confirm or deny.
If you decided not to proceed, we would never know?
We, as a general matter, do not publicize declinations. There are some exceptions under DOJ policy. I don't know that this would meet the exception.
Your boss, Jeff Sessions, has been criticized relatively relentlessly by his own boss. I'll just pick a tweet or two here. The Russian witch hunt hoax continues. This is June 5th. All because Jeff Sessions didn't tell me he was going to recuse himself. He goes on to say, and Sessions knew better than most there was no collusion. Then on July 25th, a few days ago, Attorney General Sessions has taken and capitalized a very weak on Hillary Clinton crimes, where emails, et cetera, et cetera. Does that not trickle down, criticism of your boss, does that not weaken your ability to do your job when the President of the United States is saying the Attorney General, with one step above you, is weak, doesn't know what he's doing, on and on? Like, does that not trouble you?
Troubles me a little bit. I haven't seen it impact my job. I mean, I interact with General Sessions on average once every 6 weeks or so. I'm down in D.C. I see him. As you know, he was up here a few days ago. I think the guy's the best Attorney General in 20 years.
Why?
Because when he says he's dedicated to the rule of law, he means it and he's consistent. I think like a lot of public figures, he gets a little caricatured in the press, and that happens on the right, and that happens on the left. But that's a guy who really cares about what he's doing. He wants to do it right. He cares about the ethics rules. And I personally, I'm a huge fan. And to answer your question, I have not seen that impact what I do day to day. I haven't gotten that back from the defense attorneys, or I'm not going to comment on what the president does.
Do you know Bob Mueller?
I don't know him personally. I think I met him once.
Do you think he's conducting a witch hunt of the President of the United States?
I'm not going to comment on any of that. To say that's out of my lane would be very much an understatement.
You have a lot in your lane. You can say.
That's right.
Andrew Lelling, it's a pleasure to meet you. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.